Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Allen, and I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress and the Veterans History Project in Washington, D.C. And it's conducted here in Southwest Ohio through the Cincinnati-Hamilton County Public Library under the direction of Brian Powers. And we're here today to interview William Walker, and today is November the 19th, 2024. Mr. Walker, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. I appreciate
thank you.
it, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
So before we get into your military, let's talk about your background. Okay. Where and when were you born, sir?
I was born in Grenada, Mississippi in 1946. My family still has a little dirt farm down there.
All right.
Been a while.
Do you go by William or Bill?
Bill.
Bill? All right. Do you mind if we use Bill now?
That's fine, sure.
So, what were your parents' names, your mom and dad?
My dad was named Aubrey Walker, Aubrey E. Walker, and my mother was Agnes Terry Walker.
Terry was her maiden name?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you remember when your dad was born? How old was he?
Well, he was born in 1910. He passed away in 1985.
Sorry about that.
My mother was born in 1914, and she passed away in 2004.
What did your father do as far as supporting the family?
He'd been a bookkeeper. He had, originally, he ran the family farm, and then primogeniture stepped in, and an older brother came back, his oldest brother. There were 12 kids. So they moved it through the Delta, some of the time working for cotton gin companies and others to do bookkeeping. And then the last probably 20 years of his life, he spent as a warehouse manager for a manufacturing firm there in my hometown.
How big a farm did your family have?
Oh, it was small. It was 160 acres. It dates back to the 1840s. Just in a little hill country there. It was a subsistence farm. They could feed themselves and get enough money to buy some shoes every now and then.
How was it close to your hometown? Was it close to Grenada?
It was actually. I grew up in a town called Battalion, Mississippi, which is about 35 miles from Memphis. We had relocated there in the early 1950s, and so that was about 70 miles from where the family farm had been.
All right. How do you spell Byhaven?
Byhalia. Incidentally, there happens to be one in Ohio too. It's a little crossroads, and surprisingly, it's smaller than the one I grew up in.
So, do you know how mom and dad met each other?
I don't. They were both farming families in a very rural area. Could have been a barn dance. I really don't know.
Okay. Well, Bill, did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one sister. She died in 2002, about age 60. She was born in 1941.
What was her name?
Nancy. And then she married the family. Nancy McHouston was her name.
What was her last name? Houston?
M-C-C-U-S-T-I-O-N.
Oh, okay. Did your mother work outside the home at all?
She was a seamstress, and she ended up working at the same facility that made home good products, and she sewed there. She did that for 25 or 30 years.
She made clothes for the family?
She did. She made clothes for the family, and we rarely had any canned goods unless my mother put them up.
Okay.
I mean, we weren't poor, but just very middle class.
So when you were young, what kind of home did you live in? We
rented houses until my parents never owned a home until I was in college, actually. But a wonderful, idyllic childhood.
Uh-huh. How about schooling? Where'd you go to elementary school?
Well, there was only one school in the little town, only 600 people there. It was Byhalia elementary school, and then Battalion High School, all in the same building, by the way. And
one room school?
well, no, it wasn't one room, but I told my kids I was in the top 13 of my graduating class because that's all they were. So I was also in the bottom 13 of my class.
So there were 13 total?
In my graduating class.
Boys and girls?
Yes, in the graduating class, yeah.
Well, that beats me. I only had 28. So, while were you in school? Did you participate in any sporting events?
Oh yeah, I played football and basketball and baseball and ran track. There wasn't much else to do, you know. So and easy to make the team with that few students, you know.
What position did you play in each sport? Basketball.
I was a point guard in basketball, and a wide receiver and linebacker in football.
Okay, and baseball.
I was a catcher.
And what did you participate in track?
I just ran several events.
Dashes or relays?
The 220-yard dash and relay, 1 mile relay. It's all in meters now, but the 440.
So was your high school in a county league, or who did you play?
We had a league for small schools in Mississippi, and it was one of the smallest school leagues. There were, I think, 6 other towns or schools in our conference, and we won our conference twice. So
good. How about getting to and from school? How did you get?
Well, I walked to school as a child, or rode my bike. Then they had to be hard up because when I was a senior in high school, 17 years old, I got a job driving one of the school buses. I can't imagine ever letting my child ride a school bus with a 17-year-old boy. But, we got a driver's license at age 15 in Mississippi, but as most farm kids did, I've been driving since I was about 9. So,
since you were 9?
Yeah, on the farm, driving tractors and pickup truck, do whatever. Nothing, not on the highway really.
Sure.
But it was a good education for that.
So when you were driving a truck on the farm, was it standard transmission?
Standard. Oh, that's all they had back then that I drove. I mean, we didn't.
What model was it?
Well, it was an old Ford pickup that we drove. It was my uncle's.
Okay.
Then we had I think about a 1949 Chevrolet when I was really small. It's a big deal. My dad bought a new car in 1955, the only new car he'd ever owned.
What was that?
It was a Chevrolet Impala, or Bel Air rather.
So when you had to walk to school, how far was it?
Not quite a mile. And we didn't have really winters to contend with. If we got an inch of snow, everything closed down.
I imagine so, because down in Mississippi, you weren't prepared for snow.
Right.
Was that area, was Battalion, was that involved in the Civil War at all? Do you know?
It was, and in fact, I had a great uncle who was in the Civil War, and my grandfather remembered when he was born in 1858, and he remembered, when he was 5 years old, the Union troops rode up in the front yard, such as it was, the family farm, and my great grandfather came out and met the Union major who was on horseback. I guess they were probably scavenging. I think Grant was in Mississippi at that time. Oh. And anyway, my great-grandfather shook hands with the Union major, and they both happened to be Masons. And so they left our farm alone, which I'm sure didn't add popularity to them right then.
Besides crops, did you have any animals on the farm?
They had milk cows and pigs.
But the military left them alone too?
Yeah, they left it alone for that.
Super.
And mules, probably a mule.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1964. Besides
driving a school bus when you were 17, you did do any other work in the summers?
Yeah, it sounds very archaic, but I measured cotton, which meant cotton was a commodity that was the government told how many acres you could plant in cotton and peanuts or whatever. And what I did was drive around to smaller farms and measure to confirm what acreage that they actually had growing cotton.
How'd you measure the acreage? You have to step it off, or did
We had a not it's in rods that we called it. We'd walk it up, but peg it in the ground, and walk it off to confirm it on an aerial map.
All right. So, how'd you get paid? What you earned for doing that?
Oh, not much, but it I ended up paying for college. It was you got maybe $1 an hour, and you got reimbursed for mileage. I had bought a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air.
Used?
Oh yeah, it was $250, and I went to the bank and took out a loan and paid for it in a year.
So, how about when you were driving a bus? Did you get paid for driving?
I did. It was about $30 a month, as I recall. My coach would make sure that I would also drive the bus to our games to keep me from annoying people like this.
So how about Nancy, your sister? What did she do during high school? Did she work outside the home? Or?
She didn't work outside the home. She did work at a bank part of the time as a clerk, teller. And then she married 1960, so she would about 20, I guess, when she married, 1920.
And did she work after marriage?
She did. She did work at a bank for a few years, and they started a family, and she was at home after that. So I can't say she didn't work, but she didn't get paid for it.
Sure. So how many children did Nancy have?
She had 3. Is that right? Yeah, 3 children, 1 boy and 2 girls. They were in Atlanta for most of their life, but now some are in Mississippi and some are in Tennessee, and some have just moved from the Carolinas now.
Her children are still living?
Yes, they are.
Do you see them at all?
Rarely. That's
okay. So you graduated high school in '64, and what did you do then? Did you go into college?
Well, I went to a junior college near us. I had aspirations of playing football there, so I played a little bit my freshman year, and then realized that I wasn't big enough, or fast enough, or good enough. So,
what school was that?
That's Northwest Mississippi Junior College. I was in Senatobia, Mississippi. So I was there for 2 years.
What were you studying?
Psychology.
All right. What did you do after 2 years?
I went to Ole Miss. Went there for a year, and they had clinical psychology. I was very, very Greek. I realized it just was not a good fit for me. I thought it would be. I'd always wanted to go there, but it just wasn't a good fit. So on my 4th year, I transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. It was a couple hundred miles south of there. And unfortunately, I lost a couple of hours too during that transfer, going from semester to quarter. And then the draft was going on. You only had 4 years of not being of draft status. After that time, you were up for grabs.
So while you were at Northwest Mississippi Junior College, did you work nights, weekends, or summers?
I worked on the summer and every holiday at a factory there in my hometown, running a spot welder some of the time, or just about any job they could come up with for me to do.
Well, how'd you learn to weld?
They taught me there to do it. It was not like hand welding, but a spot welder and a big machine that would just come down. I just push the buttons.
Okay. So you had a couple years of psych there, and then you went to Ole Miss, still in psych.
Right.
And then when you went to Southern Miss.
Still in psychology.
Okay. When did you graduate Southern Miss?
I never got to graduate. Lost those hours, and you know, as I said, the draft had been looming over all of us males since the early mid-'60s. And I had planned to go back, but I got a notice from, we knew the lady on the draft board, and she said, your name is up. So I took the draft physical, and I thought, well, if I gotta go, I wouldn't be able to go back to college until after I got out. But I took the Navy flight physical and the Army flight physical, and I said, look, if I if I join, can you at least guarantee me that I'll get to go to flight school? That doesn't guarantee that you'd get through it, but I didn't want to sleep on the ground with snakes, so, which we had a lot of them in Mississippi. So that worked out.
So what did you finally do?
I joined the Army.
Army?
Yes. That was in 1968 when I signed up in September.
Where'd you go to sign up?
In Memphis. But that, since I'd first heard of Vietnam, I was probably 8th grader. I had this cold feeling in the pit of my stomach that was going to play a part in my life somehow. And it ended up it did.
So after you signed up, did you come back home before you went to boot camp?
I did. I got to, and actually it was a delayed entry. Then they gave me credit for time from signing up. But I didn't actually go on active duty and into base camp at Fort Polk, Louisiana, until January of 1969. Excuse me.
What did you do in that interim?
I worked. And there was a local factory. I worked there. I worked the polls during the election that year. Just about any job I could come up with.
All right. Well, how did you get from home to Fort Polk?
A bus. I had to go to Memphis to catch this bus, and it was not an express bus. So we stopped at every little stop in the Delta and everywhere else, going all the way to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
So tell me about your experience there at Fort Polk. When you got there in January?
January of 69, and it was cold. We didn't have ice, but it would just be cold and humid. And most of the warrant officer pilots went through Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training.
So what did you do? What was your training there at Fort Polk?
You learn all the infantry. In the Army, first of all, you're an infantryman. No matter where you end up, you're taught, how to fight,
march and drill and
shoot. And
how'd you do in shooting?
Actually, I was raised as a hunter, and I was always a really good shot. But we were learning with M14s, which is a 7.62 at that point, a heavy rifle. Good, really a nice weapon. But in a prone position, lying down, I had my steel pot on, and every time I would shoot, and this gun had been, I don't know how many people had shot it, every time I would shoot, my helmet would go down and hit the sight and knock it down. So I could never adjust, and I didn't know what was going on. And at first, I thought I may have to repeat boot training because of not being an accurate shot. And finally, I learned to turn my helmet around, and then it wouldn't hit the sight.
So how long was boot camp?
I think it was about 11 weeks. I'm not sure of it. I shouldn't even tell this, but our drill sergeant was really a corrupt man.
In what regard?
Well, when we first checked into our barracks, he said, everybody fall out, leave everything here. And when we came back in the barracks an hour or so later, all of us were missing money. And he later on he got caught. But I have to say once we're learning night firing in the range with BB guns.
Uh-huh.
And you pitch up a disc and you learn how to shoot it when it's dark and hit. I hate to admit this, but he was a son of a gun, and he got stepped out in front of us and bent over to pick something up, and it was just a target-rich environment, and I shot him right in the rear end.
with your BB gun?
Yeah,
huh?
with the BB gun. And of course, all of us, he didn't know. He was demanding to know who did that. God, he was purple, and we all did about 1 million push-ups, but nobody turned me in, and my street cred went up a little bit with everyone. So
good, good.
I can't believe the first time in my life I ever shot a man in the rear end with a BB gun.
So you finished your 11 weeks there at Fort Polk. Did you get to go home before the next assignment?
No, and actually at Fort Polk there was a meningitis outbreak, so we had what they called sneeze sheets, half a pup tent on each side of a bunk to try to keep you from sneezing on someone else or vice versa. So we never got off base at all, and they loaded us up on a bus. That must have been, I don't know, there must have been 30 or 40 of us, and I'm not sure. Drove us all the way to Fort Walters, Texas, which is about 100 miles west of Dallas. And that was the primary helicopter flight school for the Army. It was a factory.
Well, how did you get to the helicopter flight school? What did you do to have to?
Well, they put us on bus and took us all the way there and we were in.
Yeah, but you're in the Army. How do you
Right.
get into helicopter school?
Well, we had qualified that during my my entrance. I said I would sign up if you'll let me get to that school.
Yeah.
Is that how you mean? So those of us who were accepted as candidates to be for pilot to be flight school were loaded on the bus and driven there. And tech officers were waiting on us when they came and yelling as soon as we got off the bus and assigned us to one of the battalions of the company on base.
So all the time you're at Fort Polk, you know you're going to be getting into this helicopter
I
school.
knew I'd be going after because that was the agreement.
That was a promise.
Right, right.
Well, what were your accommodations there at Polk? Was it tents or were they
it was
barracks?
Barracks, those old style barracks.
And when you got to Fort Walters,
They were old style barracks, but they were two floors, and we were all. That's all there was those going to a flight school.
how was a child there at Fort Walters?
It was passable, but we were. There was a lot of harassment that goes on when you're in a program like that, and I guess there's a purpose behind it. But we were given only, I think, about 3 minutes to eat a meal. So
Really?
yeah, so because you never know. In practicality, once you're in combat, you never know when you're going to get to eat. You can't spend a lot of time doing it. So you learn to eat very fast, and they harassed us a lot, that's their job, I guess.
Well, tell me a little bit, what kind of harassment would they do?
Oh, they would just come in and, for instance, if we walked down the hall and they came in, you have to stand at attention and then put you at ease. Your elbow had to be touching the wall. The same thing in line for chow. You'd do that and you had to go back to attention between each step until you stopped, and you go to an at ease position, with the legs spread, hands behind your back, all the way in. And they're yelling at you the first month is when most of this harassment took place.
Uh-huh.
And it was a surprising number of people would wash out during that. Just the harassment was a little too much for them. But that degree of harassment only lasted for the first 30 days.
Well, how long were you there at Fort Walters total?
5 months total.
And tell me what kind of helicopter flight training you had while you were there.
It was a training helicopter called the TH-55. It looked almost like a mosquito. Very sensitive, very good for teaching one pilot touch controls. But nearly all of us had never flown anything. Most of the people had never even flown as a passenger in a plane. So the first few days, the first thing you learn is to hover an aircraft. It was a very sensitive training aircraft. So that was pretty exciting just to see that, because they were going every direction. I don't know how those instructors did that until we would finally learn how to hover. Then you start to learn how to take off and then how to land and all the basic skills that one would need in practical flight.
Were you in that same TH-55 all the time?
For that whole time at Fort Walters, we would solo a night flight.
How long were you there before you soloed?
I don't remember. Probably a week, maybe about a week. I think the first four weeks of Fort Walters was ground school, learning radio, how to use the radio and international alphabet, and all the basics about flight. It was just all textbook. And once that ended, we got to go actually to the flight line, which was very exciting at that point.
Okay.
Then each time you learn more and more about flying. We would fly to pinnacles way out alone, and we have to get out and step off to make sure we had enough clearance to take off before turning around where there might be shrubs or trees. It was a good program.
Have any mishaps while you were training?
No, I didn't. Thank goodness. We did lose one fellow pilot or cadet who I think he went up really high to see how high he could go. We weren't supposed to do that, and I think he may have panicked because he fell from pretty high up, and his aircraft did. And I don't remember any other incidents. That really was an awakening.
So while you were at Fort Walters, did you have any leaves to come home?
No, I didn't. My parents and my sister and her children came to visit me once, I think around Easter.
Did you have a girlfriend back in high school?
No, not then. When I went in, I didn't. Nope, I didn't.
Didn't have a girlfriend in college?
Well, dated a lot, but it wasn't.
But no steady girlfriend.
Right.
And so you're in the Army, and you don't have anybody that you're communicating with on a regular basis.
Well, I'm writing to my parents and to my friends. One of my very good friends was an infantryman, and he had his legs blown off at the hip.
Oh.
Actually, I was in the Army at that time, so knowing, this was for real.
Did you step on a mine or what?
It was not a mine. I forget what they called them. Like a daisy chain. They'd rigged. If you step on it, it would just blow off at several explosions. And all the way at he was married, and he did survive. But actually, the next time I saw him was at Christmas of that year in '69, when I was home on leave just for Christmas, and he happened to come home for the first time since that terrible event. His mother had a party for him, and I was in uniform. Already had my orders to go to Vietnam. And it was just a little uncomfortable. Seeing him, knowing what he had been through, and then I'm sure knowing what I might be headed toward too.
Sure.
But, yeah.
So you're at Fort Polk about 11 weeks. You're at Fort Walters about 5 months.
Right.
Was Vietnam your next assignment?
No, went from Fort Walton, to Fort Rucker, Alabama, for transition to the Huey, and for tactical training. The Huey was a much easier aircraft to fly. But the skills we learned in those little TH-55 really paid off.
But the Huey was less sensitive than the 55?
It was a lot more power, more forgiving, just a wonderful aircraft. But we learned their formation flying and tactical training, gunship training, all kinds of exercises that in the air that one might need. Acceleration, deceleration, without changing your altitude at all.
How about auto rotation?
Oh yeah, we practice those almost daily.
To tell anybody that might listen to this or watch this what auto rotation is.
Well, if the rotor is turned obviously by the engine in the aircraft, but you can disengage from that. Should the engine die, you can disengage the rotor from the engine, so that as long as you keep the collective down, the one that controls the pitch, keep that flat, it will spin like a maple seed, a whirlybird, and you could do that. You could control for a pretty steep descent, and when you were near the ground, you can start to flare, and then you would pull the pitch back in, and you could actually touch down very gently with that. It's life-saving. It was remarkable, the difference in the blades on the Huey were very heavy, so the kinetic energy from spinning kept it spinning. That weight helped those work that way.
So the props on the top, they were parallel to the ground. Did you have a tail rotor that was perpendicular to the ground?
Right, a tail rotor was perpendicular to the ground. It was, as you can imagine, an engine spinning like that creates a lot of torque, and the tail rotor, being upright like this, counteracts that torque. So you control that with your feet. Okay. Your right hand takes care of it. It's called the cyclic, and that's the plane that the rotor turns in. That's for going forward or backwards or to the side. The left hand controlled the throttle, and then it also controlled the amount of pitch you put in the blade so that you can lift or descend more easily. And each time you change one thing, you have to change everything else with your hands and feet. It's kind of like arm wrestling an octopus. It takes a while to get used to it, but you can become very adept at it.
While you were there at Fort Rucker, did you have to practice taking troops in and extracting troops?
We practiced those maneuvers. I don't recall actually having, well, I take that back. We did have, some of the time would have one or two other cadets in the aircraft with us, but we flew the way you would fly to insert troops or pick them up and take off from different areas, but we didn't generally take troops themselves with us.
Okay. So from Fort Rucker, you did come home before you went to
I got a 30-day leave in January, right after my birthday. We got to come home. My birthday was January 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my orders to depart on February 17th of 1970.
February what, 17?
February 17th.
Where did you depart from on the 17th?
I flew from Memphis to, I think, connected in Dallas, and from Dallas up to San Francisco.
Were there military flights or were they commercial flights?
Those were commercial flights, and regular commercial airport, and ended up having to sleep in the airport that night when I got in, and had a 7 a.m. departure the following morning. So that would have been the 16th when I went, because I departed on the 17th. Try to sleep in those chairs. They were all connected, so not a very restful sleep.
I'll bet. So from Frisco you went to where in Vietnam?
Well, we flew from there to Anchorage and refueled from Anchorage to Kyoto, Japan, and then from Kyoto to Tan Son Nhut, which is not far from Saigon, southern part of Vietnam.
Okay, well,
it was like a 26-hour flight altogether, a long way.
I've got a map here. We'll show some of the places where you've been, but you landed at Tan Son Nhut?
Yes. Excuse me. Excuse me.
What time of day did you get there?
It was, when we left, pardon me, around 7 a.m. Excuse me. Left around 7 a.m. and we had daylight the whole way over because you were flying with the sun. The longest day I've ever seen. We landed just at dusk, and were issued blankets and bedding. So we made cots, bunks, whatever they had for us.
When you got off the plane, what struck you when you got off the plane about
the odor? It was an unforgettable scent, and the reason behind that is because the commonplace in Vietnam for the soldiers was to burn human feces with jet fuel, and it just permeated the air and everything. So that was it.
How about the heat? How was the temperature?
Well, it wasn't bad. You know, I'm from Mississippi, so originally, so I didn't really notice it at that time.
Okay.
And February was like the very end of the monsoons, I think. There might have been a little bit left of that.
What accommodations did you have? First of all, did you stay there at Tan Son Nhut?
No, we issued a bedding. We made up our bunks and went in to get something at the mess hall. And they said, "Oh, you got to turn that in because we're sending you up north." So it sent me up to Camp Eagle, which is near Hue, Phu Bai. And they said, "Well, we're going to send you up north where the action is." And they weren't kidding. So we landed there. They issued us bedding again.
Now, was that the same day, or was
It's the same day.
Same day. You land in Tan Son Nhut, and you don't even have time to get organized, and they got you going up to Phu Bai.
Right. And got there and thought, maybe we relaxed a little bit. We went to the officers' club and had a drink, and they said, "We're going to send you up to Camp Evans," which is another like 25, 30 miles further north toward the DMZ.
How did you get from Phu Bai to from Camp Eagle to Camp Evans?
On a Chinook. Took us. There were, I think, 6 of us from my flight school class that were going to the Lancers. And that our battalion, the 158th Assault Helicopter Battalion, was formed up and sent to Vietnam initially in January, February of '69. So with those who were there were finishing a one-year tour. They were very short on pilots, so they just sent us right in there. And so that night, pretty late when we got there, and boy, I was beat. When I got to my bunk, I don't think I fixed up anything. I think I just collapsed into the bunk, and I slept soundly that night. There was an artillery battery up behind our unit, and which woke me up a few times. I did learn to sleep through those.
Oh, gee.
But it was funny. There was a little. I would keep things on the shelf there, an ammo box, and every morning I'd have to pick them up and put them back because a vibration of those things firing would knock them all off.
So what were you sleeping in? Were you in a hooch or were you in a
I was
barracks?
in a hooch.
Describe that for us.
Well, it's tin roof with sandbags on the roof to help keep the roof down. Screened sides with big wooden shutters that should first for the monsoons, and also kept you from being a target inside your hooch should anything happen. And we had, I think there were maybe 6, maybe 8 hooches for the pilots. I can't tell you for sure, but they were adequate. And each of us would have our own space in the hooch. I think we could take. I think it was 6 people, 6 pilots in each hooch.
How was the food?
Oh, it's terrible. It was terrible. But you learn to eat it.
How big was the camp there at Evans?
It was one of the smaller camps there, but it had during the day would have more takeoffs and landings than any other airport in the world. It was just we were very near the mountains. Where when we got into the mountains, it was about 5 miles to our west, and from our unit it was maybe 40 miles to the Ashaw Valley. But most of our combat took place in those mountains to our west. They ended up in the DMZ rather.
Well, was that camp big enough to have medical facility?
It did. We had a MASH unit there. There were some of the infantry units were there. The 3rd Brigade, the 1st of the 506, 2nd of the 506, with Easy Company, their Band of Brothers group. I mean, they weren't there, but their unit was still there. And it was mostly a staging area for going into combat or bringing people back.
I think I interviewed a orthopedic surgeon that was up at Camp Evans.
I beg your pardon?
I think I interviewed an orthopedic surgeon that was up at Camp Evans.
Oh, I bet he stayed busy.
It was Dr. Berger.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very busy. So while you were there, did you have to go out to retrieve wounded soldiers?
Oh yeah. We were not a medevac unit, but if we were there, and there was somebody who was injured, we would pick them up and bring them home back.
Right.
I'll tell you that on my first night with the Lancer, I went out for a check ride at dusk. It was just at dusk, and the aircraft commander that I was flying with just showed me around a little bit, and we flew over Firebase Granite, which was just on our side of the mountains, but on the mountainside, and you could see that there was an action going on there, and we flew over it, and I said, I'm so impressed with how our guys are giving us suppressive fire during this. And then he looked at me and said, it's not suppressive fire, those are muzzle flashes, they're shooting at us. So I had my chicken plate on.
What was that? What was the chicken plate?
It's an armored chest plate that would cover, could withstand 1 or 2 rounds before shattering.
And how about your butt? Did you have protection on your seat?
No, well, they were armored seats, but it depended. It was a 51 caliber, which was really the helicopter killer. There was no protection against that. But for small arm fire, that could help protect you. Then that night, a siren sounded on the base that and then reported, get your helmets and your weapons. There's been movement in the perimeter, and so I went outside and had on a poncho because it was raining, and just a light drizzle. And you know, you're in pitch black, and you're looking around trying not to move, and then finally started firing artillery rounds with flares that would come down on parachutes, and they would, you know, float and drop. You know, as they did, the shadows would move and they would elongate, and you look and you couldn't tell, is that a person or is that a shadow? You know, and boy, the rain would hit my poncho and it sounded so loud. Like, oh God, they're going to hear me. You know? But then after about an hour, they sounded off that all clear, so we got to go back in. I don't know if anybody slept anymore that night. But,
well, during the alarm, was there any firing going on?
No, but if you had movement along the perimeter, on the concertina wire, you know, sappers would come in who could crawl under the wire, and they would satchel charges.
But did you have any of that first night?
No, we didn't. Thank God. But we were looking for it, and then you know, movement gives your position away, and you hope your own people don't shoot you. You don't know what's going on, so try to be very still. Then our regular mission started the next day. Then.
So, tell me about an average day while you're up there in the front lines with your helicopter. Take me through an average day.
You know, I think that my first flights were resupply. They would call them logging missions. That would be to take some ammo or food or water or whatever the troops needed, bandages, you know, who were out in the field. Most of as I said, nearly all of our operations were in the mountains. And some of these were pretty good sized mountains. But some would be on mountaintops. A base would be put on a mountaintop so that provided you don't have to fight uphill. You're at the top already, so it's more difficult to fight uphill. We would resupply them, but then they had skirmishers scattered everywhere. And the method of contacting them and identifying who they were, you'd say, okay, you know the general coordinates of where they were, and you'd say, okay, pop a smoke. And they would throw a smoke grenade that might be yellow or red or not, sometimes white, not usually white. And you would identify and say, oh, I have red, and if that was correct, you would go in, that's where they were, because it was through triple canopy and jungle, and you had to make sure where they were. And if we could get to them just by hovering down, we would. But in some cases in the triple canopy, the infantryman would have to create a hole or a column of air in a jungle. So we would have to come to a hover and go down. And as I said, we were teams with our crew chief and door gunners, and they would direct us down. They'd say, sir, can you move the tail about 6 inches to the left? And they'd say, okay, can you slide right a little bit? And all the way until you get to the bottom. You could.
And these are the guys on the ground that are giving you those directions?
No, they are our crew chief and door gunner.
Okay.
And then when we get to the bottom, we would offload, or if we picked up injured or if they were dead, we'd pick those up. And then you have to go back up, reverse that, which got kind of exciting if you were under fire, trying to get back out of there. And it was not uncommon either.
Where did the crew chief sit?
The crew chief sat on the left-hand side of the aircraft, and the aircraft commander sat in the left seat, pilot seat. The co-pilot sat in the right seat, and the door gunner sat in the right side in the rear. Those guys were amazing. They had, the doors were always off the back, so they were hanging out some of the time and very exposed.
What kind of armament did they have?
They had a chicken plate, and of course the helmet gave some protection. There really wasn't much protection for them. There really wasn't much for us either.
Were the guns that they had, were they fixed to the helicopter or were they handheld?
They were fixed, although some occasionally would put it on a strap, so it gave them a little more mobility. But most of the time they were on the each side M60 machine guns. I think they have a firing rate of about 800 rounds a minute, I think. So they were really good. And our crew chief and door gunner were responsible for keeping them in good firing condition, which was critical. Only once or twice did I have one that jammed.
So you got the crew chief, you got the door gunner, you got the pilot in control.
Right.
Is there anybody else?
Well, you've got the aircraft commander. That was a position.
Where's he sit?
That's a left-hand seat. In the mountains, we were left-hand. I think in the flats, they were more, I think it was not uncommon to see them in the right-hand seat.
What was your position?
Well, I started out as a co-pilot. Then everyone moved, as kind of a trial run, they would make you first pilot. And if you performed okay, then you become aircraft commander. And each time you pick up a little more responsibility, which I remember the first times as a first pilot flying and in control of the aircraft and taking fire, and I was so angry. I'm trying to do this job. Don't shoot at me, too. You know, the nerve. I just wanted to get that guy who was shooting at us. But it was, the Army did a great job of winnowing to make sure that they had the people in the right position for the most of the time, I think. And we'll tell you what. So
what kind of a copter were you flying?
It was a Huey. It was a Huey.
All the time up there?
Yes, an H model. I got to fly once in a Cobra with one of our sister companies, just not a combat mission, just to go out and fly it. That was a nice aircraft. Did
you ever count the number of holes that your helicopters sustained?
Oh yeah. I didn't take for the most part. I didn't take a lot of hits. I took several hits throughout the 12 months, except my last Special Forces flight in the DMZ, and we took 38 there in the blink of an eye.
Did you have any injuries?
No, I didn't.
What's the closest call you had?
That was a close call, that one in the DMZ, and that was late in my tour.
Why were you in the DMZ?
We would insert, our air was teeming with uniformed, well-armed, well-trained North Vietnamese soldiers. They were we had Viet Cong, but we didn't deal with them much. They were the ones who would fire mortars at our base and things. But these were really a formidable enemy. So if we, your question was,
why were you in the DMZ?
Oh, they would pour, although the North Vietnamese would sign guarantees that they would never cross the DMZ. It didn't mean anything. They would pour through there. So we would put in, they were called killer teams. There were 5-man Special Forces teams that were really there to monitor movement and not really to get in contact, although they always got in contact. I was a new guy, and we were working in Quan Tri, which was a base further north of us, and we were just doing logging missions, nothing, and we got scrambled to go extract a team from the DMZ. I'd never been in one of these before, and my aircraft commander kept trying to contact them, the men on the ground. He couldn't reach them. He was trying to coordinate with the command and control and some others ahead of me. He said, "Look, you keep trying to reach this team, killer team." So he was on that radio, and I was on one. I was calling him. It was a Lancer, whatever his number was. I didn't use my own number then. But finally, this guy whispered over the mic, and we were 8 miles away, maybe 7 miles. And he said, "We have movement 360 degrees, 15 meters." He said, "Don't come in right now." So I whispered back to him, "Roger," because that's a pretty noisy machine, you know. And a couple of minutes later, we were on the way in, and he whispered again. He said, "One of them don't just step to my foot, but I don't think he saw me." And his voice was quivering. And I said, "Oh man, that's a noisy machine." And the idea that we got to go in there. And finally, the procedure for going into the DMZ was we would have a command and control aircraft that would have the ground forces commander on there. Then we had a whole bird, which is what we were, and then a chase bird in case the whole bird went down. So when the whole bird would get near the DMZ, we would drop down to nap of the earth flying, which is literally 2-3 feet off the ground, and maximum speed of usually around 120 knots, 130 miles an hour, whatever. And at that speed and that altitude, you can't navigate. So the guy, your command and control, would have to tell you when to turn or turn back, and when to flare. And then we put the flare, which slows you pretty quickly, and then say there, and then when you drop down, and you just have to kind of grit your teeth and hope you get in and out. It's amazing how quickly the American soldiers would get on an aircraft when you were picking them up, and then we came out. That's the only mission in the DMZ I ever had that we didn't take any fire. And I think the North Vietnamese soldiers didn't know that we were there, and they didn't know that we knew they were there. Because every other time was pretty nightmarish going in there.
Well, how often were you in the DMZ?
About once a month, sometimes twice a month. We spent half our time at Camp Evans and about half our time at Quang Tri to support the units there, and so these were part of our missions there. So they'd turn your hair gray.
So did any of your other fellow helicopters get shot down?
Oh yeah. And,
give me a couple examples of that if you can.
Well, the first one, the first time I ever saw anybody killed, it was we were the chase bird, and one of our aircraft was down to pick up some soldiers to extract them, and their aircraft was hit, and suddenly I saw the tail boom swing and hit a guy on the ground, one of our guys on the ground. I mean, then the aircraft had been hit, and it was just very tragic. So we got the others out, and they're just part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of those missions like that. You just kind of tuck them away. You don't want to have to deal with them now. You know you got to deal with them sometime.
Yeah.
But you'd ask me about other missions, but if we had a large insertion, let's say 20 or more aircraft, and we just into the mountains, the landings on the mountains could only accommodate one aircraft at a time. Down in the Delta, I think you would see pictures of big lifts where 20 aircraft would go at once and they'd all land at the same time. Well, we would be 20 or 30 seconds apart from the aircraft in front of us. That would give you time to land, and as soon as you're lifting out, the next aircraft is coming ideally for that to be that way. So I remember on the first really, really hot insertion, really hot, and we were back probably 25 aircraft or more. And so you're hearing all the radio transmissions, taking heavy fire. Sometimes you'd hear a scream, not often, but you could see aircraft. Sometimes see an aircraft go down, and you think, we got to run this same gauntlet, And then when you get close, the last 30, 45 seconds, you're the only target because everybody else is out, so they train everything on you, and you just kind of have to tune it out somehow. I mean, you're certainly aware of everything, but you got to fly the aircraft. Number one, you got to fly the aircraft and take it in, and then get out as quickly as you can too. Sometimes try to be creative getting out to give airspeed and evasiveness.
So when you're trying to rescue these guys, are they giving you any help on ground fire?
Oh yeah. Oh, they fired. They were amazing. The men on the ground, and we also had Cobra gunships which were tremendous. A very very good friend of mine from one of our sister companies, a big friend of the Lancers, Steve Smith, down around Knoxville, and he was a Cobra pilot, and they would come in. They would literally circle us some of the time if we were on the ground and it was really hot with minigun fire and suppressive fire, the rockets. They were amazing what they would do for us.
So describe the Cobra gunship for somebody that might be watching.
The Cobra gunship was very only 36-inch wide cockpit, the fuselage. So one sits in front of the other. The aircraft commander sits in back, closer to the rotor, and the co-pilot, who's actually the gunner, sits in the front. and they could fly faster than we could. They could get a little more angle in their attack, but they had a minigun, and later on they had the mini Vulcan cannon, which is 30 millimeter high explosive rounds would fire. They had rockets, sometimes flechette rockets, which I really like those. They were 2,300 little nails with a wing on the back or fin. And when they would pop a pink smoke at them, when that rocket was at that, they were doing Mach 2. They would all turn around and be right and straight. They would go through anything. Incredible. But anyway, they were so brave. Incredible what they did to give us cover.
Well, now, the helicopter doesn't have any wings like the fixed wing plane. Where were these rockets and where were these miniguns attached to the...
I can show you a picture of one, but for the narrow plane, very sleek. And on each side there was a rocket pod I can't remember, maybe it's 8 rockets in there. Then also in the mini Vulcan cannon was underneath the nose of the aircraft. And they also had mini guns on there. And interestingly enough, they were, if you can imagine, if you're firing 2 machine guns underneath like that, and which you could turn, aiming, when the outboard minigun became too close to the fuselage, it would stop firing, and the one on the left, the outboard, would double up. So they fired at 2,000 rounds per minute per each one. 4,000 altogether, but they never lost rate of fire.
Oh man!
And they were just amazing. They were just great people. I mean, they meant an awful lot, especially when you see them coming over. And once or twice, I took a little shrapnel damage to the rotor blades from our own Cobras, but it was they gave you great cover. I don't know how we could have done any of our missions without them.
They got to be best friends, didn't they?
Oh yeah, I sure did.
When you had to go in there one at a time with several helicopters, you wanted to be the first or second one in because the later you got in there, the more fire you took.
Yeah, well, sometimes being the first one was no picnic either. I mean, we also excuse me. I'm sorry. Can I take a break just a minute?
Sure. Okay, let's give him time to focus in on this.
Okay.
You got it?
Yes, I'm looking at it.
So what kind of helicopter is that?
Oh, this is a Huey, and the white dot denotes the Lancers, the unit I was in. This happens to be this is a SOG, which is Studies and Observation Group, which were all run by MACV, and they were clandestine missions outside the country. And this particular, a pilot from another unit took a picture of one of our birds coming back from Laos, and gave us his picture 30 years later. Anyway, they would take all the doors off, front door, pilot's doors as well, to expedite our escape should we go down. And had a ladder. We would drop these guys off. Usually they're special forces. They usually were there for 3 or 4 days or until they ran into trouble, which it seemed like they always did. And we would pull them out. If it was a cold extraction, they would climb all the way up the ladder and get in the aircraft. But if it was a hot extraction, they had to clip themselves onto the ladder so free up their hands. They could be firing their weapons while we were firing, and the gunships would be firing too to give us cover. But then they had to ride that way, sometime up to an hour or more because there was no friendly place to sit down. They were amazing people that would do that. I can't imagine doing that. But they were a crazy bunch too. Anyway, we flew a lot of these missions. They were never logged as such. Again, they were pretty much top secret missions.
We weren't in Laos, were we?
No, right.
Officially.
Right.
And we weren't.
Those would go to North Vietnam sometime too, by the way. But
so what did you go to North Vietnam for?
One of these same kind of missions. Twice I think I went there. We also worked with the Project Delta in April and June of 70, which was the forerunner of the Delta Force. They selected 3 aircraft from us to go up. That was, again, a top secret operation at the time. We lived in tents at Mylock, which was just at the base of the mountains. And my first day up, we had lost an aircraft commander and the whole crew. And this guy was our most charismatic flight lead at the time, Eugene Miller, Captain Eugene Miller, a wonderful man. And I was still a brand new first pilot, almost aircraft commander. But anyway, he was killed. We were devastated by the loss. I mean, personally, that was just.
How did you lose him?
He was the command and control aircraft for the Delta project, one of their operations, and operating mostly in Quezon at the time, which again was teaming with the enemy. And we weren't told much about it. They were not allowed to tell anyone really what was going on. But they were hovering near. They thought they saw some activity. They just wanted to check it out, and an RPG hit them and destroyed the aircraft and killed everyone on board. It really was devastating. And that night, our company commander said, "Okay, Walker, pack your gear. You're going to take a crew, another aircraft up to replace Captain Miller." And I said, "I can't replace him. I mean, he was an amazing hero, but didn't get a vote. So I took another guy from Ohio, Andy Archer, and as our co-pilot. And I can't remember now who the crew members were, but we flew up. Andy's best friend, his best man at his wedding, and they'd been with our unit maybe, I don't even know if it was a week, had been the co-pilot on Captain Miller's aircraft. So he was exuding pain from that loss. But we took the aircraft up, and when we got, I didn't know we didn't have any information about this operation.
No, was this at night?
No, this was during the day.
Daytime?
But we landed at Mylock, which was just a village, and parked, and were told to go into the information room, and there was we got obviously a CIA guy, there was a Marine general, a colonel, and an Army colonel, for a briefing. And just as they started telling us what we were there, how the operation was run, this terrible blaring horn sounded, which told you that there was a prairie fire. Somebody's in bad trouble, being overrun. And so he said, "Okay, you can go out. You can be the chase bird to see how we do these operations." Well, we went out, and they had put the ladder on my aircraft, and I said, "Wait, I can't. I've never been on one of these operations." They said, "We don't have time." And I said, "Somebody else has to fly it." Then he said, "Get in and go. You have to go." And they gave me a co-pilot, a guy named Keith Boyd, who had been there for 4 or 5 days. At least he had seen how these operations went. So we took off, and we would fly it in a delta formation. Hence the Delta project. We had 2 gunships, a whole bird, a chase bird, and command and control. And then the officer in charge, before we left, handed me a piece of paper that had a diagram. And he said, on the way out, he was trying to brief me. And he said, "Okay, when you get out, we'll tell you when you're going to do a high overhead approach. They won't be popping smoke. But if you see the panels laid out, the international orange, and in a certain configuration, they have to be that configuration. So you're going to pick them up, and then just before I was to do this high overhead approach, which means you kind of spiral out and drop down to get to the dead zone. And he said, if there are more than 7, or if they don't match this pattern that I gave you, kill them all." I said, "Say again." I said, "You heard me?" He said, "If it's more than 7, they'll kill you. So kill them all if it's more than 7, or if it's not this way. This is their identification." Thankfully, there were 7, no more than that, and the panels were right. It was in elephant grass, which is like 12 to 18 feet high and very abrasive, almost like bamboo. And it came to a hover over these people, and I could just see that there were people there. And when you're hovering, particularly in something like that, you have to look at the horizon to hold your position. You can't pay attention to anything else, and so it holds you very still.
Well, there's not much horizon with all trees around, is there?
Well, there was here. This is the Quezon Plains.
Okay.
But it was like a field of elephant grass. And anyway, I could feel them climbing up the ladder, and I heard, I guess the crew chief say, "We're up." I couldn't tell, but I turned to look. There was a guy leaning over the console with the North Vietnamese Army uniform on and holding an AK-47. And I'm looking right at Laos over here, and North Vietnam was like 2 miles up from us. And I thought, we picked up the bad guys. I'm telling you, my blood ran cold. I couldn't believe this. And fortunately, Keith Boyd, saw the expression on my face and realized that I thought we'd picked up the bad guys. And these were Chinese mercenaries. They're Nung, N-U-N-G family from China. Their family business is mercenaries. They hire out. Somebody could have told me.
So they were on our side, but you sure didn't know it.
I didn't know it, but it provided a lot of comic relief for our guys who were up there at the time that they could have told me before then.
Yeah.
That was very heady stuff.
Well, tell me about this 7 guys. If there's more than 7, was that supposed to be the enemy if there were more than 7?
Yes. What these guys would do, the Nung family would have on North Vietnamese uniform and weapon, but they would go out in a poncho so that you couldn't see what they had on. And I guess they must have had the helmet. I don't know how they did that with the helmet, because North Vietnamese had like a pith helmet. But anyway, once they got on the ground, they would fold up or either dispose of the poncho or hide it away somehow. And their job was to try to infiltrate the North Vietnamese units that were there. And there were a lot of them in that area.
Well, of these 7 guys that you got out of there, how many of them were these mercenaries?
Well, they were all mercenaries.
All mercenaries?
Those were all mercenaries. We could carry, because of the mountains, we could only carry 7 South Vietnamese soldiers in full gear or 5 American soldiers. I think in the flatlands they could carry 7 American soldiers and maybe more South Vietnamese soldiers. Anyway, that was a real awakening. And then one night, when we were in the tent, one of the guys had a radio, transistor radio, and he found Hanoi Hannah. It was a version of her. And she was speaking a very heavily accented voice and said, "I want to welcome the Lancers to Mylock." And start to think, oh my God, they know we're here. They had very good intelligence. But then you didn't sleep very well, knowing that they knew where you were.
Sure.
You want me to help here? Okay.
Let's rest it on the table.
All right.
Now, Ken, if I need to tip this some way to avoid glare, let me know.
I'm tipping this.
Is it all right?
Yeah, it's there right now. Yep, it's good.
Okay. So
Well,
go ahead and explain what this is.
All right. Well, this inset here is the Vietnam. The green is North Vietnam. Everything south of this was South Vietnam. And Vietnam was, the Americans' involvement divided the country into 4 quarters, if you will, not by geography so much. But this was called 4 Corps, 3 Corps, 2 Corps. Then we were in I Corps, in Roman numeral 1, all the way up there by the DMZ with Quezon, the Ashaw Valley, a tremendous amount of activity. These were all the aircraft in the 101st.
All of these?
All of these. These top 4 were in my unit. There we are with the white dot.
What was the red dot?
The red dot were the Ghost Riders. The blue was the Phoenix, and the Redskins were the gold dot in the Cobras. We were a very close unit. We flew with all of these other units as well on different missions, but most of the time we flew with our own company or with our sister companies in that battalion, the 158th.
What are those helicopters up there on the upper right?
Oh, these were the heavy lifting helicopters. Most of the time these weren't involved in actual combat, although one of these during the Ripcord, the siege of Ripcord, which was a terrible thing in the 101st, was shot down on top of the ammo dump and caught fire and burned. And it was Ripcord was a nightmarish operation anyway. But I may have to get my glasses out.
Were you involved in Ripcord?
Involved in Ripcord very much.
What was it?
It happened that the U.S. was trying to withdraw ground troops. Hopefully, that was the goal, so they could try to turn it over to the South Vietnamese to protect their country or to fight the war. So we located a fire base called Ripcord, pretty far out here. It's right there. It was Ripcord. It was the Ashaw Valley is right in here, so it's like one ridge line from the Ashaw Valley. And put this fire base in. And the purpose of it was to be able to reach with artillery into the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That was the route the North Vietnamese used to carry armaments and soldiers all the way down to the south, the more heavily populated areas. So the idea was that we'd use this fire base to suppress movement through there and really just disorganize the North Vietnamese. Well, in the meantime, the North Vietnamese army built up over about 2 months all around Ripcord, and they brought in, it's amazing, they brought in such heavy weaponry, and just put Ripcord under siege. Ripcord was far enough in that it was hard to resupply all the time. You couldn't get there right away. We were at Evans, which is, Camp Evans is right here, and we ran out there nighttime in the mountains was scary. It was just like flying in a cave. But can you hear me all right, Matt? Sorry.
I sure can.
There were 3 helipads on Ripcord. So those are the 3 we had to use to either unload or off-road or pick up wounded or whatever. But the North Vietnamese had zeroed each of them in with mortars. We lost a lot of people on Ripcord. And when we would go in, you had to go and try to take evasive motion. If you've ever seen a hornet's nest with angry hornets flying around, that's what the tracers looked like around Ripcord. It was just such an active area. And the artillery on Ripcord, the last few weeks of it, had no elevation at all. They were firing close enough that they could fire directly at the enemy. But we would come in and try to be as evasive as possible and not announce which pad we were going to use until we got there. And then you would fly it, and you had maybe at most 5 seconds to get in and out because the mortars would come raining in as soon as they were all zeroed in. And it was nightmares. I don't know how those people on the ground did that for that long. And finally, we had to make a withdrawal from Ripcord. That was a nightmarish place. O'Reilly was the next one, and that's where I told you I have a good friend who was a gunship pilot with the Redskins on that particular mission. Another good friend of mine, Ken Peterson, our maintenance officer, happened to fly with me that day. And we went out just to do a resupply run, and we had to pick up we were supposed to pick up a couple of bodies, and it was a deep hover down, maybe 200 feet deep. And they had popped a smoke for us. We identified. We got in the first time. It was very tight, and we took out a wounded. And the second time we went in, everything started exploding. And once we got on the ground, trees were exploding. The guy on the ground was saying, "Get out, get out, get out." Well, you got to go back up this thing, so you don't have much room to move. And we had Redskin 16 and his wingman were giving us cover. And it was a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle. It's very high explosive. So the trees were exploding around us. And once we got out, we were trying to take some evasive maneuvers, and I heard and his wingmen talking. They could see where the firing was coming from on a mountaintop. Just it was just maybe I don't know if it was a quarter mile from where we were or what. But as we were taking evasive actions, I heard one of them cheering, and when we turned back, it was like a mushroom-shaped cloud coming off of it. Not atomic, but just an explosion. And our gunship cover had hit I guess their ammo dump. It knocked that out, and the one pilot was cheering, and they started calling Redskin 16, Steve Smith. Couldn't get an answer. So we turned back and started looking for his aircraft. And we looked, and finally, one of my door gunner, I think, said, I see a Cobra going into O'Reilly right now. And he had taken so many hits in his aircraft, his transmission was draining. There's no way he could have made it to the flatlands. And once that happens, it just becomes a rock. It just plummets. So we went down, and he'd gotten it on the ground on that fire base, still in a terrible area. And we came in and picked up him and his co-pilot, and he was going home in about a week or two.
Oh.
So he got on and talking to him, and he said he was leaving, and I said, "You got to give me something to remember me by." So he tore off his patch, which I still have here. And then on the way out, my co-pilot said, "What were those orange bugs?" I was looking at it, was orange, but those are orange tracers. They had a 51 caliber that they were shooting. I didn't even know. I didn't even see those. I was just trying to get out. But they looked like a softball coming at you, and you'd see every fifth round is a tracer. So for every one you see, there are 4 of them you don't see. But they were the 51 caliber were really probably knocked out more helicopters than anything else did.
Wow.
But this whole area, this is Quezon area in here. This is the Ashaw Valley in here. Places that have such a history in our involvement in Vietnam.
Well, did the Ho Chi Minh Trail come down through the Ashaw Valley?
It did. When we were out of it, they would use the valley itself. Hamburger Hill was right over here in this area. Our unit was very involved. That was before I got there, thank goodness.
What's the orange area up there?
That's Cambodia down there. That's further to the south. Thinking of these missions, when my first mission into Laos was I was a co-pilot, and an Air Force fighter pilot had been shot down. He had ejected far into Laos and further down. So we went, and we had to sign all these documents that we'd never tell everybody anything, where we were going to take the American insignia off, take off our uniforms. And they gave me it's called a blood chit. Let me use this one, not anymore. They gave us these, excuse me, it's spoken, it's written in several languages, that if you find...
Is that all right? Do you need tilt it anyway?
I'm tilting it here.
Okay, it's in several languages. That if you find this person and you return them to friendlies, we'll give you like $500, which is like a 10-year salary. It's called a blood chit. And you keep that with you, and if you have to use it. And they gave us our escape and evasion maps. We're into Thailand. Excuse me. Anyway, during the briefing, that was my first one of these missions. During the briefing, they said, you'll only have 10 minutes on station, or you won't have enough fuel to get back. So, cloudy, rainy day, terrible weather. And another guy who happens to live here in Centerville, I didn't know until later, was one of the gunship pilots that was on that same mission. We had to fly, it was VFR, visual flight rules, but between layers of clouds, we'd be exposed to to too much bad weather and enemy fire. And we got out there, and the other aircraft actually made the rescue. Hovered down. It was a cloud cover, and the soldier had a smoke grenade, so he popped it, and colored and identified it on the side of this mountain. The other pilot uses a rotor wash to create a hole in the crowd there that they could lower down far enough for this ladder to get him out. And we got him out. We came all the way back to Fubai Way, and we got a letter of commendation. I didn't do anything. I was just there, you know. But I aged a lot during that. But anyway, they gave us a letter of commendation from the Air Force, but he misspelled my name, so mine says Walter, William Walter. So, anyway, things worked out well. It's nice when one work comes the way it should, the way you hope it will. Did you get hooked up again?
Let me see your medals.
Yes. Army, you know, kind of just gave. Oops, I get that's right. But it's just kind of basic medals. 101st pretty much passed out Bronze Stars.
Okay, so just what are these?
Well, this is a Vietnam conflict.
This?
Right. This is air medals, which we was by the Army's regulations. You know, you were supposed to have no more than 60 hours per month of flight. But when I came home after that year, I had over 1,270 hours of flight time, of which those over 1,050 were combat hours. You just said we were their only. We didn't have a road, so we were their sole source of any support. So you have to go.
Well, what's this?
Oh, that's a Bronze Star, but I don't remember doing anything that would have.
What's that?
You know what? I've forgotten what some of the. I think that's the. You know, I'm sorry. I can't remember what these
About
are.
the green.
That's something to do with. This is embarrassing. I can't tell you what these are for. I never took it much seriously. They're not very happy with the awards.
One on the left says National Defense Medal.
Oh, okay. Well, I was the awards and decorations officer for our company, but I don't think I ever. Maybe I'm a poor writer, but I had so many guys in our company that should have gotten major decorations, and very few, if any, ever did.
So, tell me again how many hours you had flying?
Total for my year in Vietnam, I logged over 1,270 hours.
And of those hours, you had over 1,000?
Over 1,050 combat hours. Every time we went into the mountains, or certainly out of country, or the DMZ, it was a combat, logged as combat.
And all those flights and all that time, you didn't get any wounds?
Wow, but I had a real hard time with PTSD after I got home, for years and years and years.
Somebody upstairs was looking after you.
I tell you, I took hits a lot, and I came out and think, I don't know how that happened. I was a bird hunter raised, and I thought, how can you miss me? How can you not hit me? And I was not complaining, but I will say that I've got a picture somewhere. I was on a 5-ship mission once with South Vietnamese soldiers, and I happened to be chalk trail. You'd be lead one day, you'd be trail, or what. And each position, the first two positions and the last position in a formation like that have things to do other than just fly. Flight's got lead has to lead the way in, obviously. The second aircraft has to check frequencies and make contact with others, and the one in the back keeps everything together. So we were in the mountains, not far from O'Reilly again. And when the first aircraft went in, each of us had 7 South Vietnamese soldiers. As the first aircraft landed on this pinnacle, there was a brownish, dirty, orange look explosion at the bottom of the hill, the mountain there. And that's mortar. And as the second aircraft went in, and it was 30 seconds apart again, and I'm 2.5 miles from like that, but you can see what's going on. Anyway, the next explosion was working up the hill, and this third aircraft came in, and it was up closer again. And I said to my co-pilot, "This is going to be close." So the aircraft in front of us went in, and an explosion not far behind it, and then we were on short final. I would say maybe 100, 120 feet from touchdown, and I heard this explosion, and the aircraft lifted up, and then we came on down, and I went into the LZ, waiting for these guys to get off, and waited, and they didn't get off, and I thought, I can't wait any longer. So I went ahead and took off, and the next one hit right behind us, and kind of lifted us up. And
you still got the Vietnamese with you?
yeah, still got them on board. But so I thought, we can't stay on there. We've got it zeroed in now. So back in my radio went out, but one of my fellow lancers flew up, and his co-pilot was going like charades, and I knew there was some kind of damage to us. I didn't know what it was. So I got a picture of it somewhere. It's called a horizontal elevator. It's on the back side of the tail. It just kind of helps keep the tail from rising. And this mortar round had come through the rotor blades, which, well, they're 18 inches wide, and the airspace it fell through is occupied by that 18 inches 11.5 times a second. And it came through there, then it hit in a cross beam in that elevator, and then exploded. So that's the only damage we had. I took it back to and our maintenance guy came out and put another one, and he said, "Oh, you can go back now." So, that's now? You want me to go back right now? But I don't think I was ever the same after that. And that was, I don't know how you can calculate that. Had it gone off, there's no way you could survive. There was no way you could have survived it. We were on a pinnacle. That bothered me. The rest I can put away, but that one really bothered me. That hung on we had a little shack we called our officers club, and it was hanging on the wall there when I left, and I have a picture. You put your arm through it, but it didn't go off until it went through there.
Oh man.
Yeah, that still haunts me sometimes. You think that can't have happened. You know?
Well, how did you get word that your tour was over, or were you keeping track of it on a calendar?
Oh yeah, very much so. One other short story. I tell you that this happened to other people too. I'm sure. We were in the mountains again near Firebase Fuller, and during this period when they're trying to turn over the fighting to the South Vietnamese army, there was a mole in the South Vietnamese government. He's now a national hero in
North Vietnam.
In Vietnam as a country, because he gave every location where we were, especially when we were working with South Vietnamese soldiers. So we'd go to places sometimes there shouldn't have been anybody there, and there would be, regimental strength sometime waiting for us. And those were pretty nightmares. So we had this mission toward Khe Sanh from Firebase Fuller, which means that I could show you on a map. But I was Chalk 2 in this one, and I think we had 10 or 12 aircraft going in. And first aircraft went in and reported very heavy fire. So I went in, and it was very heavy fire, and I hopped off and took off backwards to get out of it. Then next 6, 8 aircraft got shot up, and so we had guys on the ground. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to look in a mirror again. So I said, I'm gonna go get half of them, you get the rest of them to the flight lead. So I went in, and my most creative approach, and sat down, and all 16 survivors got on my aircraft.
Wow.
And so and with a crew of 4, we got 20 people.
On a Huey?
Yeah, on a Huey. And I couldn't, they didn't speak English. We didn't speak any Vietnamese. I could lift up and it would just drop right back down. And we couldn't get them off. And I said, well, I'm not going to be, they were coming out of the woods, and I hopped the edge of that pinnacle and just jumped off. And fortunately, we got enough airspeed to become airborne, clipped a lot of tree limbs and treetops on the way down, but became airborne. And I could fly I just couldn't land. So, but we could do a running. We'd practice this in training. Did a running landing in Quantry at their airstrip because I just couldn't stop. We burned the skids a little bit, but everybody got out okay.
Wow.
But I can't tell you how much I did not want to go back in there. That was, but I didn't know if I could ever look in a mirror again.
What was your last operation before you left to come home?
Well, at the beginning of February, and I was supposed to leave February 17th. So I could kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel for me. I was really starting to think about it. I've been very lucky to kind of go in the belly of the beast that many times and not get hurt, because a lot of our guys were. We have 24 names on the wall in Arlington. And I heard all these aircraft. I kept thinking, maybe they'll give me some time off, away from out of combat. But on February 5th, aircraft came into Evans all night long. So I knew something was up. And I think, boy, I'm just so close to going home. And the next day was we were sent to Quantry, and I was named as flight lead on one of the 2 flights into Laos. But there were 120 aircraft in each flight, and I don't even know why they chose me, unless I was just used to going into Laos. But because I think it was a major in the other flight. But anyway, we had 30-second separation, and 7 men on every aircraft, 120 aircraft in one flight, 120 aircraft in the other flight. Excuse me. But we made it in and out of ours and back without losing anybody. And that was nothing I did. It was just did. And the other flight was not that fortunate. One of the guys I knew I went to flight school with was killed in that one. And then I came home. That was the last. I think I had one more combat mission after that. There was nothing. Then I finally got to leave on the 18th.
Where'd you fly out of? Come home.
Took me back went to Da Nang, and from Da Nang back to Tan Son Nhut, and from Tan Son Nhut then to Kyoto, and then from Kyoto to Seattle at the time.
Okay. And
then Seattle to Los Angeles.
When you got to the airport in Seattle, did you get off the plane?
Oh yeah, changed. Well, that was Tiger Airlines. I think they were Flying Tiger Airlines that we flew from Vietnam to the States, and then I don't know if it was American or one of the airlines. I just transferred. It was close enough. Had to connect through L.A. and go from L.A. to Memphis. I probably went to Dallas first, but again, I hadn't slept in like 50 hours at that point. And
did you have your uniform on?
Yeah, had uniform on. And saddle, I don't think I ever left that part of the terminal. I just changed planes in the same terminal, so it was not a big deal. But when I got to L.A., we had to change terminals. And walking through this terminal, a group of people, and they were behind a rope or barrier, and they were just saying awful stuff to us. I don't know, is this what my country thinks of me? It was devastating. That was one of the low points of my life. Then when I finally got home that night, the only thing missing was a brass band. My family was there and friends, you know.
And where was that?
I was in Memphis.
Memphis?
Yeah.
Okay.
It took a long time. One of my best friends that lost I lost 3 hooch mates, and then one was, his leg was shot off by a 51 caliber, and we haven't seen each other for a long time, but we stay in contact. Warrant, Ohio, really a nice kid.
Uh-huh. So when you got back home, where was home at that time? Where did you go?
Well, I came back to my hometown with my parents, and then had a 30-day leave, and then I was sent to Fort Carson, Colorado. And I didn't know I had PTSD. It was not a term. Anyway, as I was checking into Fort Carson, they said, "Oh, pilot, we'll be sending you back in 6 to 9 months." I said,
back in 69 months?
Yeah, 6 to 9 months.
Oh, 6 to 9.
And I said, "No, you got to give me a year." I expected a year. They said, "Well, all of them are rotating back that soon." I thought, I can't do that now. You got to give me at least a year. So they were giving people early outs, And I was fortunate enough, I pestered the Department of the Army enough times that they said, okay, well you can be part of this early out that everybody else is doing.
So
Thank
did you
God.
get out from Fort Carson
I got out from Fort Carson in May of 71.
and came back to Mississippi?
Mississippi, then I lived in Memphis for a while, worked. It's hard to find a job, and I don't think I interviewed very well then either. So I just carried a lot of stuff with me, you know. And
So
I finally got
where
a
did
job.
you work in Memphis?
Well, I worked for an employment agency for a while. I worked for an insurance company doing follow-up investigations for a while. And finally, after I got there in May, in excuse me, of December of '71, I got a job with Carpenter Technology Corporation, especially metals mill, and they do parts for aircraft and all the special stuff. And I started to work for them, and I worked for them for 43 years. A great company. I was going to go back to college while I was working in Memphis, and the professor in one of my classes said something about, it was just very demeaning. I assumed that he was an avid protester. I don't have a problem with people not wanting to go there or was involved. But I was so insulted about that, I just walked out of the classroom, and I haven't been in one since, except for technically. So I never got my degree. But I can't imagine the arc of my life being any better than it's been. You know, and I think I was where I was supposed to be.
So when you retired from that job, you just stayed retired?
Well, I worked for one of my customers I wasn't ready to retire. Denise was still teaching, so I worked for them part-time, 20 hours a week for 4 or 5 years. And then when I was ready to retire, then I was ready to retire. But Denise got to travel with me. I traveled so much for my career. And, we went to Italy for 3 weeks. You know, she still has family there. You guys are very patient. I'm sorry for rambling on.
No, you're not. This has been very interesting. So when did you meet Denise?
Met Denise a year and a half after I got back, October of '72.
Where?
Reading, Pennsylvania. That's where I got a story for you. My home office was in Reading, Pennsylvania, and I was up for training. And it was a Thursday. We'd been with company people all night, every day. So we finally had the night off. And in one of the motels, it's pretty sprawling, you know, and I saw all these girls and going to a room next to mine. And what had happened, some bridal shop in town had burned. So any weddings that they were doing dresses for, you know, for bridesmaids or whatever, they set up a motel room to do that. Well, Denise was in college, and she had a date, and he drove and brought her there, but she knocked on my door by mistake. And she said, "I'm here for my fitting," and I said, "Oh, come on in." so she did, and we just hit. I mean, she does most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I said, "Well, I've read about stuff like this." Nothing happened, but except that we just really hit it off, and then really liked her, and I could tell she liked me too.
Well, where was
Finally,
she?
she said, "Well, am I in the wrong room?" And I said, "Well, it's a matter of opinion." So
You said what?
It's a matter of opinion. So she called me a name and walked out and had to explain to her girlfriends where she was. But I talked to one of her girlfriends in the hall to find out if they were going anywhere after that. I wanted to see her again. So I talked, and we just really hit it off. And then a month or so later, when I was coming back again, I called her and said, we'd like to have dinner. And so we started dating, and then got married in July 6th of
July 6th of 74?
Right.
So where was she in college?
Kutztown State University.
Did she graduate?
Yes, in education.
When did she graduate?
When?
Yep. Yeah. Before or after your wedding?
Just before our wedding.
Okay.
Like a month before.
And what did she teach?
English and writing. She was a special ed teacher, but she ended up teaching at St. Charles Catholic School here for about another 20 years. She taught in Memphis for about 2 years, I think, and in special ed.
And you and Denise had some children?
Three children, 2 girls and a boy.
Okay, and we talked about that earlier, but we didn't say who they were. Who was? Tell me age-wise who was first, second, and third.
Okay, Sarah is now Sarah Walker Boyle. She was our oldest, our firstborn. She was born in '76. She lives in Columbus area.
Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah, Hilliard, actually. Then our second child was born in April of '78. Marissa Walker, now she's Marissa Walker Forsora. She lives in New
How do you
Jersey.
spell her last name?
Frissora.
Okay.
They live in I'm trying to think of the name. It's in New Jersey. They lived in New York City, in Brooklyn, for a long time. She was there for 9/11, by the way, which was nightmarish. Midland Park, New Jersey. They can see the skyline of the city, but they're pretty far North Jersey. Then our son Michael was born in '80, and he lives in can't think of the name of the town, north of Galena, Ohio. It's not too far from Polaris in Columbus.
Okay.
They have Michael and his wife have 2 boys, Matt and Alex.
What's Michael do?
He's in banking with Huntington Bank. He's in their corporate office in Easton.
And what's Marissa's husband do?
He is a tech support manager, or actually part owner of a tech support company in Jersey, working with mid-sized companies with their technical system.
They have children?
Yes, they have 2, Gabriella and Anthony. Excuse me.
How about Sarah's husband?
He's a doctor, and people say, "Oh, you married a doctor?" And she didn't know I married a student. He's a doctor now, family practitioner in Dublin, Ohio. They live in Hilliard. They have their oldest is now a freshman at UD, Ben. Their second child is Reese Boyle, and she's a senior in high school. Then Kellen Boyle is an 8th grader, and they're all in the Hilliard area.
Okay. So, do you follow any religion?
Yes, Catholic.
Catholic.
I was Methodist
So
when we got married, and then converted after Michael was born.
Oh. So, what parish are you in?
Incarnation Parish.
Okay. Well, we've covered an awful lot here today.
Yeah, I'm sorry I rambled like
Ken,
that.
is there anything you'd like to ask him about or talk to him about?
Well, I'm married to an Italian woman. Curious what your wife's maiden name is.
Well, her father was De Fulvio from the Abruzzo section of Italy, near not too far from Tuscany. Then on her mother's side, Lucchese's in Sicily. So we got to visit both sides of the family when we went over 4 years ago now, I guess.
My wife's name is Ventura, from Sicily, her family.
What part of Sicily?
I cannot tell you. I've heard Pomero. Is that right? Begins with a P.
Okay. Probably ends in a vowel too, I bet. Oh gosh, what's the name of the town we flew into on the western end of the island? That's a beautiful place, by the way. If you've ever been there, I'm a history nut too, and it's really quite a place.
Also, did you have the opportunity to see any USO shows while you were over there?
I did see. Got to go to the Bob Hope show.
Did you?
Was really a real treat. One of my fellow pilots was being the motor pool officer, and he borrowed a Jeep for us to drive down to Camp Eagle to see it. So we saw Bob Hope and
Anne Margaret.
Anne Margaret was in, and I can't remember all the people. Johnny Bench came. I remember I was impressed with Johnny Bench being there. That was really a thrill to get to see that.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, sure. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Well, Bill, it's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it has
And
been.
Congratulations on getting through all you got through.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for this
I
wonderful
appreciate
interview.
that so much. Oh, thank you very much. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.